You know what a T-Rex looks like? You've seen the big teeth, the tiny arms, the whole Jurassic Park thing. And if someone asked you to name the scariest animal that ever lived, you'd probably say T-Rex or Megalodon, because those are the two that Hollywood has been feeding you since childhood. But here's the problem with that answer. Prehistoric life on Earth lasted for roughly 4 billion years. And the creatures that everyone knows, the dinosaur greatest hits, they occupied maybe 180 million years of that timeline, which means there are billions of years of absolute biological nightmares that nobody ever talks about. Creatures that make T-Rex look like a golden retriever. Today we're going down the Prehistoric Creatures Iceberg. We're starting at the surface with the animals you think you know, and by the time we reach the bottom, you're going to be looking at organisms so bizarre that the scientists who discovered them genuinely thought their own fossils were broken. Or that they were hallucinating, that's not a joke. One of these animals was literally named after hallucinations. Let's start at the top, surface level. The creatures everyone recognizes, but almost nobody understands correctly. Tyrannosaurus rex, the poster child of prehistoric terror, 40 feet long, 7 tons, teeth like serrated bananas. You've seen the movies, but the T-Rex you grew up with is increasingly wrong. Paleontologists now believe many theropod dinosaurs, including close relatives of T-Rex, had feathers. Not full plumage like a parrot, but patchy, filament-like coverings that would have made a 7-ton predator look less like a reptilian killing machine and more like the world's most aggressive turkey. Museums are slowly updating their models, but most of them still show the smooth-skinned Hollywood version because feathered dinosaurs don't sell as many gift shop figurines. And there's another problem. T-Rex probably couldn't run as fast as Jurassic Park suggested. Biomechanical studies indicate its top speed was somewhere around 12 miles per hour. A reasonably fit human can sprint at 15, so you could potentially outrun a T-Rex. Potentially. Though I wouldn't recommend testing that theory. Then there's Megalodon. 50 feet of shark that could bite through a car. Lived from about 23 million to roughly 3 million years ago, which means it was swimming around while our earliest ancestors were starting to walk upright in Africa. Its teeth are the size of your hand. Its bite force exceeded 20 tons. For context, a modern great white manages about 1 ton, so Megalodon had 20 times the bite force of an animal that already terrifies people out of the ocean. But here's the detail that gets left out of every documentary. We've never found a complete Megalodon skeleton, because like all sharks, its body was made of cartilage, not bone. Cartilage decomposes, it doesn't fossilize well. Almost everything we know about this animal, the size estimates, the body shape, the reconstructions in museum lobbies, all of it is extrapolated from teeth and a handful of vertebrae. We're essentially reconstructing a 50-foot predator from its dental records. It's the paleontological equivalent of finding someone's dentures and trying to guess their body weight. And Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat. 11-inch fangs up to 750 pounds, built like a refrigerator with claws. Smilodon lived in the Americas until about 10,000 years ago, which means the first humans to cross into North America almost certainly encountered these animals face to face. Fossils from the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles tell a particularly grim story. Hundreds of Smilodon specimens have been pulled from those pits, and the evidence suggests they hunted in packs. They would ambush prey animals stuck in the natural asphalt and then get stuck themselves. Groups of apex predators with foot-long serrated teeth working together, dying together. The tar pits are essentially a mass grave of cooperating saber-toothed cats, and people jog past it in downtown LA like it's a Starbucks. And since we're still at the surface, one more. Therizinosaurus, a 33-foot dinosaur from the late Cretaceous with 3-foot-long claws on each hand, the longest claws of any land animal ever discovered. When scientists first found the claws in Mongolia, they assumed they belonged to a giant predator, some kind of super raptor that slashed its prey apart. Turns out Therizinosaurus was an herbivore. It used those 3-foot murder weapons to rake vegetation into piles and strip bark from trees. Imagine a school bus-sized animal with wolverine claws that only eats salad. Nobody has found its skull yet, by the way. We know its body. We know its terrifying hands. but its face remains a complete mystery. Evolution has a sense of humour and it's drier than mine, but we're still on the surface. Let's go deeper. Shallow water on the iceberg. Creatures that are bigger, meaner and closer to our own timeline than anyone is comfortable admitting. Titanoboa, the largest snake that ever lived, 42 feet long, weighing over 2,500 pounds, found in the Cerrillon coal mine in Colombia, buried in rock formations dating back 58 to 60 million years, right after the dinosaurs disappeared. Scientists discovered the fossils by accident while mining for coal. They initially thought the vertebrae belonged to a crocodile because nobody expected snake bones that big. Each individual vertebra was the size of a dinner plate. To put the full animal in perspective, modern anacondas max out at about 20 feet. Titanoboa was double that. It lived in a massive tropical floodplain and likely ambushed prey at the water's edge, constricting victims with a body thicker than a grown man's torso. It shared its swamp with crocodilians that it almost certainly preyed upon. The biggest snake in history ate crocodiles, just casually, as a lifestyle choice. Standing next to Titanoboa on this tier is Deinosuchus. The name literally translates to terror crocodile, which is the most honest thing paleontology has ever produced. This animal grew up to 33 feet long with teeth the size of bananas. It lived between 75 and 82 million years ago across what is now the American South and Southwest, from Montana down to Mississippi. At least 3 distinct species patrolled different river systems and coastlines, which means there wasn't just one type of terror crocodile. There was a regional franchise. And it didn't just hunt fish. Bite marks found on dinosaur skeletons confirm that Deinosuchus attacked and killed full-grown dinosaurs. Not juveniles, not scavenge targets, active walking adult dinosaurs. It bit through their bones. The attack strategy was probably similar to modern crocodiles lurking in shallow water and ambushing animals that came to drink. Except the thing doing the ambushing was 33 feet long and could crush a dinosaur's leg like a breadstick. Modern crocodiles already kill roughly 1,000 people per year and they top out at around 20 feet. Now scale that animal up to the length of a school bus and give it teeth that can puncture dinosaur armor plating. Deinosuchus makes every crocodile alive today look like a bath toy. And while we're in this tier, the terror birds. Phorus racidi, 10 feet tall, up to 500 pounds, with massive beaks they used like hatchets to bludgeon and stab their prey. They were flightless, but they didn't need wings because they could run at speeds up to 60 miles per hour. For reference, an ostrich maxes out at 43. These birds were the apex predators of South America for millions of years, and they went extinct only about 2 million years ago. They overlapped with early human populations. Imagine being among the first people to reach South America and encountering a 10-foot carnivorous bird that can outrun a horse and uses its face as a weapon. That's not a nature encounter, that's a boss fight. Also lurking in this tier of the iceberg is Megalania, an 18-foot, 1,300-pound relative of the Komodo dragon that lived in Australia until about 50,000 years ago. The first Aboriginal Australians almost certainly encountered this animal, an 18-foot venomous lizard the weight of a small car, roaming the same landscape as the first human settlers of the continent. If every myth has roots in reality, the Aboriginal legends of enormous reptilian creatures suddenly make a lot more sense. Megalania is also one of the strongest candidates for inspiring dragon myths in the Southern Hemisphere. A giant, predatory, possibly venomous lizard that disappeared just as human oral history was developing. Connect the dots yourself. And while we're talking about things that flew, Argentavis magnificens deserves a mention. The largest flying bird that ever lived, a prehistoric vulture-like bird standing as tall as an adult human with a wingspan between 19 and 23 feet. For reference, the largest flying bird alive today, the wandering albatross, has a wingspan of about 11 feet. Argentavis nearly doubled that. It weighed about 240 pounds, which was so heavy that scientists aren't entirely sure how it got airborne. Current models suggest it relied heavily on thermals and probably couldn't take off from flat ground. It had to launch from elevated terrain and essentially glide like a hang glider made of feathers and murder. It lived in Argentina about 6 million years ago and likely scavenged large carcasses, though at that size the line between scavenger and predator gets blurry. Also at this depth sits the short-faced bear, Arctodus simus. Standing on its hind legs, this animal reached 11 feet tall and weighed over a ton. It was the largest land predator in North America between 1.8 million and 11,000 years ago. The largest polar bears today top out at about 1,500 pounds. The short-faced bear was roughly 50% larger than that. It needed about 35 pounds of meat per day just to keep existing. And it went extinct right around the time humans arrived in the Americas, which either means early humans were extremely effective hunters or extremely unlucky neighbours. Probably both. Now we're entering the darker waters of the iceberg, and this is where the ocean reveals itself as the true horror show of prehistoric life. Dunkleosteus, a 33-foot armoured fish from the Devonian period roughly 360 to 380 million years ago. This animal had no teeth. None. Instead, its jaws contained two long, bony blades that were self-sharpening, constantly grinding against each other to maintain razor edges, functioning like biological sheet metal cutters. Scientists calculated that Dunkleosteus could snap its jaws open and shut in 1/50th of a second, creating a suction effect that yanked prey into its mouth before they could even flinch. Its bite force rivaled T-Rex. And remember, this was a fish. It was one of the earliest apex predators with jaws, swimming the oceans 130 million years before the first dinosaur ever hatched. And it was apparently a cannibal. Fossils of Dunkleosteus have been found with bite marks from other Dunkleosteus specimens. So not only was it armoured, self-sharpening and built like a submarine, it also ate its own kind. Nature really committed to the bit with this one. But Dunkleosteus wasn't even the scariest thing in prehistoric oceans. That honour might belong to Livyatan melvilli, a 50-foot sperm whale from about 10 million years ago with 14-inch teeth, a 10-foot skull and what scientists have called the biggest tetrapod bite ever found. Named after the biblical sea monster Livyatan and Herman Melville, the author of Moby Dick. Because when you discover the deadliest whale in history, you apparently get poetic about it. Each tooth was roughly the size of a 2-litre soda bottle and more than double the size of the largest T-Rex teeth ever discovered. Its mouth was 6 feet long and 4 feet wide, which means it could comfortably fit an adult human inside. Or the entire head of a Tyrannosaurus rex. While today's sperm whales are gentle squid eaters that suck in their food, Livyatan used those massive jaws to actively hunt and kill other whales. Medium-sized baleen whales were its preferred target. It bit them, held them and drowned them. Like a 50-foot orca with the temperament of a great white shark and teeth the size of your forearm. And it lived in the same waters as Megalodon. The two apex predators competed for the exact same food off the coast of what is now Peru. The ocean 10 million years ago was basically a death match between the largest shark and the deadliest whale that ever existed. And nobody won because they both eventually went extinct when ocean temperatures dropped and their food supply collapsed. Basilosaurus, Basilosaurus, from reptile to skull-cracking whale. While we're in the deep water, meet Basilosaurus. Despite the name, which translates to king lizard, it was neither a king nor a lizard. It was a 60-foot whale from about 40 million years ago, back when whales were still transitioning from land-dwelling ancestors. Its skull was 3 feet long, and recent CT scans of Basilosaurus fossils have revealed tooth marks on the skulls of smaller whales, confirming that it crushed their heads to kill them. Paleontologists had these fossils since the 1800s, but spent decades thinking the bones belonged to a marine reptile. They eventually realised it was a whale that specialised in cracking open the skulls of other marine mammals. Museums had the evidence for over a century. They just didn't want to believe whales could be that violent. If you're still watching this deep into the iceberg, hit subscribe. I cover the creatures museums don't put on the welcome banner every week. Now we're going deeper. This is where the iceberg gets truly dark. Helicoprion, the buzzsaw fish, a 20-foot predator from 270 million years ago, with a spiral of teeth embedded in its lower jaw that looked exactly like a circular saw blade. This is not a metaphor, an actual spiral of about 180 interlocking teeth that rotated backward as the jaw closed, pulling prey into its throat like a biological conveyor belt. It also functioned as a shucking mechanism, cracking open the shells of ancient ammonites and extracting the soft bodies inside. Scientists found the first Helicoprion tooth whorl in Russia in 1899, and then spent the next 114 years arguing about where on the animal's body this wheel of teeth was actually located. Some proposed it sat on the snout, others suggested the dorsal fin. One researcher genuinely published a reconstruction with the tooth spiral mounted on its tail. It took until 2013 when CT scans of a specimen from an Idaho mine finally confirmed the spiral was in the lower jaw. 114 years of debate, and the answer was in the mouth, where teeth normally go. The smallest teeth in the world measured about 5 millimeters. The largest, the newest ones, reached 55 millimeters. And as the fish grew, the oldest, smallest teeth were pushed inward, creating that distinctive spiral pattern. Prey that entered the mouth was locked in. The teeth pointed down the throat, so anything caught had exactly one direction to go. Also, Helicoprion was not even a shark. It was a ratfish, a relative of the modern Chimera. So not only did it have a buzzsaw for a mouth, it was not even the type of animal everyone assumed it was for over a century. Next on this tier, Arthropleura, the largest land invertebrate ever discovered. An 8-foot-long millipede from the Carboniferous period, about 300 million years ago, with dozens of jointed legs covered in thick armoured plates, nearly 2 feet wide and weighing close to 110 pounds. This creature crawled through ancient forests where the atmosphere contained about 35% more oxygen than today, which is one of the reasons insects and arthropods could grow to absurd sizes during this era. Arthropleura probably ate decaying plant matter and smaller invertebrates, so it wasn't technically a predator. But imagine walking through a forest and watching an armoured millipede the length of a car scuttle past your feet. The psychological damage alone would last generations. Right next to Arthropleura on this tier is Meganeura, a dragonfly-like insect with a wingspan exceeding 28 inches. Hold out your arm from fingertip to shoulder. That's roughly the wingspan of this flying insect. It had 6 spiny legs that it used as an aerial trap to snag prey mid-flight, catching everything from other insects to small amphibians and even early vertebrates. It was the apex predator of Carboniferous clearings and streams, a flying insect nearly 2.5 feet across that hunted vertebrates. The Carboniferous period was essentially a horror movie written by someone who really didn't like bugs. And then Jackal 8-foot sea scorpion from the Psilopterus, a Neurian period about 400 million years ago. The largest arthropod ever known, multiple limbs, some armed with spikes, 2 terminated in massive pincers. No documented predators anywhere in the fossil record. It terrorised shallow coastlines for millions of years, and it looked disturbingly similar to the facehugger from the Alien franchise. Except it was real, and 8 feet long, and nothing in the ocean at that time could challenge it. Now we've reached the deepest level of the iceberg, the abyss. And I need to prepare you for what's down here. The creatures at this depth don't follow any body plan you recognise. Some of them are so strange that the scientists who found them literally could not determine which end was the front. Welcome to the Cambrian explosion. About 540 million years ago, evolution went completely off the rails. In a relatively short geological window, life went from mostly simple, single-celled organisms and basic multicellular blobs to a carnival of complex body plans that would never be repeated again. The animals that emerged during this period are, without exaggeration, the most alien things that have ever existed on this planet. Hallucigenia, named in 1977 by paleontologist Simon Conway Morris because, and this is the actual scientific rationale for naming a species, the animal was so bizarre he felt like he was hallucinating when he looked at it. That's the real reason. It's in the published description. Hallucigenia was about an inch long, with 7 pairs of rigid spines on its back, 7 or 8 pairs of thin, clawed legs underneath, and a head that scientists couldn't even identify for decades. They originally reconstructed it upside down, with the spines as legs and the legs as tentacles on its back. That reconstruction stood for years in textbooks and museum displays. Then researchers realised they had the top and bottom switched, but they still couldn't figure out which end was the head and which was the tail. Then, in 2015, electron microscopy finally revealed tiny eyes and a simple mouth on one end, settling the debate. So, for nearly 40 years, trained paleontologists had this animal flipped the wrong way and facing the wrong direction. It's like finding a car and spending 4 decades arguing about which end has the steering wheel. Beside Hallucigenia in the abyss sits Opabinia, a flat-bodied swimmer with 5 eyes arranged across the top of its head, 30 swimming fins along its body, and a long, flexible proboscis sticking out of its face with a claw-like structure at the end that looked like a tiny Venus flytrap. 5 eyes. Not 2, not 4. 5 distinct eyes on one 3-inch animal. When paleontologist Harry Whittington first presented his Opabinia reconstruction at a scientific conference in 1975, the audience reportedly burst into laughter because they assumed it was a joke. It was not a joke, nobody was laughing once they realised the reconstruction was accurate. Opabinia probably used that proboscis to dig worms and small organisms out of the sea floor and pass them backward to its mouth, which faced underneath and behind its head. 3 inches long, 5 eyes, a vacuum tube for a face, and a mouth on the back of its head. The Cambrian Ocean was not okay. Then there's the Tully Monster, Tully Monstrum gregarium, found in the Mason Creek fossil beds of Illinois, and so profoundly confusing to scientists that it became the state fossil of Illinois, partly as an act of defiant pride in having produced something nobody can classify. It was about 1 foot long with eyes on rigid stalks like a hammerhead shark, and a long proboscis tipped with a tiny jaw-like claw. For over 50 years after its discovery in 1958, scientists could not determine whether the Tully monster was a vertebrate, an invertebrate, or something that doesn't fit neatly into either category. Some research teams published papers declaring it a vertebrate related to lampreys. Other teams published papers directly contradicting those findings. As of the most recent studies, the debate still isn't settled. We have an animal that lived 300 million years ago. We have thousands of excellent fossils preserved in beautiful detail, and the scientific community still cannot agree on what basic category of life this animal belongs to. That is how weird the Tully monster is. And at the absolute bottom of the iceberg, ruling the Cambrian seas 500 million years ago, sits Anomalocaris, the nightmare shrimp, up to 3 feet long, which made it the largest animal on Earth at the time by a massive margin. It had 2 large segmented grasping appendages in front of its mouth, a circular jaw made of overlapping plates that could never fully close, and enormous compound eyes containing 16,000 individual lenses each, giving it the sharpest vision of any animal in the Cambrian Ocean by far. Anomalocaris was the undisputed apex predator of its era. Everything else in the ocean was food. Its ring-shaped mouth worked like a nutcracker, squeezing and cracking the hard exoskeletons of trilobites that dominated the seafloor. Fossilized trilobites have been found with distinctive semicircular bite marks that perfectly match Anomalocaris jaw plates. We have the victim, and we have the murder weapon. Case closed 500 million years later. But here's the wildest part of the entire iceberg. For decades, different parts of Anomalocaris were classified as 3 completely separate animals. The grasping appendages were catalogued as a species of shrimp. The circular mouth was classified as a jellyfish called Peytoia, and the body was filed as a sea cucumber named Legania. 3 different species in 3 different museum display cases, and nobody realised they were all pieces of the same creature until 1985, when a complete specimen was finally found. Scientists had accidentally taken apart a single nightmare predator and sorted its body parts into 3 harmless animals, the paleontological equivalent of finding a wolf and cataloguing it as 3 separate hamsters. So what's the takeaway from descending this entire iceberg? The creatures at the top, the T-Rexes and Megalodons, are terrifying because of their size and raw power. But the creatures at the bottom are terrifying for a completely different reason. They represent how profoundly strange life can get when it has billions of years to experiment, without anyone supervising the process. 5 eyes, buzzsaw jaws, animals reconstructed upside down and backward for 4 decades. Organisms so alien that separate body parts were classified as entirely different species for over a century. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The fossil record preserves maybe 1% of all species that have ever existed on Earth, which means for every Hallucigenia and an Anomalocaris we've managed to find, there are potentially hundreds of equally bizarre creatures that left no trace at all. They lived, they hunted, they terrified everything around them, and they vanished without leaving a single bone or shell to prove they were ever here. Soft-bodied animals are almost never preserved. Entire ecosystems of boneless, shell-less creatures could have existed for millions of years, and we would have 0 evidence. The Burgess Shale Formation in Canada, where many Cambrian fossils were found, is considered a miraculous preservation event. Without that specific geological accident, we might never have known Anomalocaris, Opabinia, or Hallucigenia existed at all. And the Burgess Shale represents one location during one narrow time window. What was living everywhere else? The iceberg we just explored? It's the visible tip of a much, much deeper one, and we will never see the bottom. If you want to see what happens when modern museums get prehistoric creatures completely wrong, that video is on screen now. Subscribe, because next week we're going even deeper.